Thank you, Agustina. And thank you also, Nanette. Thank you to Rautenstrauch-Joest Museum. And of course, thank you to all of our guests whom I will introduce to you in a minute. However, before we delve into the discussion and before I introduce our guest in more depth, I would like to say a few words to offer a frame for our discussion today. And I believe this is important in this current moment. And let me briefly say why. So today's discussion is tackling deep historical injustices in a context of current contemporary loss of life in Namibia today that is tragically directly linked to the colonial genocide. The corona pandemic serves as a magnifying glass for global and local imbalances and also for their historical roots. And this is particularly glaring in Namibia today, because there we can see that the uneven land distribution, where more than 70% of arable land is still in the hands of white European descendants of settlers, including many descendants of direct beneficiaries of the land theft that followed the genocide. And this fact has actually led to the exclusion of Namibia from accessing corona vaccines through the so-called COVAX facility, because countries of the global south can only access COVAX if they are not deemed a middle income country. Now, the uneven distribution of resources in Namibia that is still an echo of the genocide leads to Namibia being classed as a middle income country and therefore not gaining access to COVAX. And that means that some of the devastation that is wreaked by Corona today is, again, a direct echo of the imbalances that originated, the injustices that originated in the time of the first genocide of the 20th century committed by German colonial troops in what is today Namibia. And that is why it is with urgency, with consideration and reflection, that I want to invite all of us to engage in today's debate, which seeks to explore German-Namibian history, taking as a jumping off point the intervention that you just saw, Augustina basically sat in, right? The room that Esther Muinjangue and Ida Hoffmann have curated in the Resist exhibition in Rautenstrauch-Joest Museum in Cologne. So they curated this room showcasing Namibian German history, specifically the genocide and the historical context, from Namibian and specifically and importantly from Herero and Nama perspectives. And these are the perspectives we want to delve in deeper in today's discussion. So it's my honor to introduce today's guests and panelists. And I would like to begin with Esther Utjiua Muinjangue. She's a Namibian politician, the first woman to lead a political party in Namibia that has gained parliamentary representation. She was also the country's first female presidential candidate. Since last year, she's also serving as the Vice Minister for Health and Social Services in Namibia. And for 15 years prior to that, she was the chairperson of the Over Herero and Over Bandero Genocide Foundation. Welcome, Esther Utjiua Muinjangue.
Thank you very much, Joshua, and thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be part of these discussions tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. It is an honor to have you. Thank you for taking the time. I would like to introduce our next guest, Sam Geiseb. He is a member of the Nama Genocide Technical Committee, where he's working to secure and advance the rights of the descendants of the victims of the genocide that occurred in Namibia from 1904. He's also a consultant and the director of Integrated Social Development Services in Windhoek. Welcome, Sam.
Thanks for having me.
Our next guest is Kambanda Nokokure Veii. She was an executive member of the Oba Herero and Oba Banderu Genocide Foundation and has been the director of the Riruako Center for Genocide and Memory Studies in Windhoek since 2018. Welcome, Kambanda.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. We are having some technical problems.
Yes, Kambanda, I think the reason is that I think you're sharing a room. And so I think there's a feedback between two microphones.
There are actually 3 computers in the same space, I think.
Right.
So,
No, I think what we did was, because of the bad lightning, we thought we will just log in onto our cell phones.
Right.
Yeah, which has better lightning.
Yes, it is a very good idea. I think the only challenge is that you would have to ensure that only one device is unmuted at a time.
Okay.
Yeah. Other than
Okay,
that,
let me quickly fix that. Sorry about that.
No problem at all.
Okay.
So yes, thank you for being with us, and also thank you for adjusting in terms of devices. We can see Bakumba very clearly, and so I'd like to introduce him as our next guest. Bakumba Hengari is a member of the Oba Herero and Oba Banderu Genocide Foundation, a foundation that works to address the genocide committed against Herero and Nama people. Welcome, Bakumba.
Thank you, and it's a very pleasure to be part of this activity tonight.
Now, if it is possible for the two of you, I see that, so you are in there with your phones, and there's also a laptop, I believe. And yeah, I think now you have muted the laptop. Maybe it works better if you unmute on your phones, if that is a convenient way for you to then join the conversation. Thank you. Now, last but certainly not least, I would like to introduce and welcome Israel Konyachike. He was born in Namibia and has lived in Berlin for more than 30 years, where he works as an educational consultant, focusing on German colonial history in what was then German Southwest Africa, but also looking further into the apartheid era that followed and all the way into present-day Namibia. He's a Herero descendant and activist, and so he also advocates for the German government to take full responsibility for its colonial crimes in present-day Namibia.
I like my people here.
We welcome you to this conversation. Okay. Unfortunately, we're still facing a bit of technical difficulty. So I would kindly ask Makuma to also mute, if possible, on that phone. We can see you very clearly. It's true that the lighting is better. Thank you. I think now we are all muted so that we avoid feedback. Now, I'd like to, start the discussion by asking each of you a question in turn. And I'd like to invite you to also use your answers to these questions as an opportunity to let us know some of the key ways in which your life and your current work is connected to the topics we're discussing today. Because I think it's important to recognize we're not dealing with mere facts here. Of course, facts are important, but we're dealing with history, memory, and also the responsibility that comes with both. And of course, this is then linked to your individual and your collective lived experience. So I'd just like to invite you to speak to this dimension, this important dimension of what we're discussing today as you answer the following questions. And regarding these questions, I would now like to start with the co-curator of the room that gave occasion to today's discussion. So I'd like to start with Esther Utjiua, and I would simply like to ask you, what motivated you to respond to the museum inviting you to curate this room? I know that you and Ida Hoffman can't be here today, curated this together. So what was your motivation to say, yes, I'm going to curate this room in Cologne, Germany?
Thank you very much, Joshua. And good evening. I think we have the same time. Before I answer your question, I would love to say that I was raised by my great-grandmother, who was born in 1911. So she was born 3 years after the war ended. And she was born by parents who survived the genocide. And the stories, the narratives that she used to tell us at bedtime were surrounding or centered around the German and Herero War, as they called it. Because in those days, they call it Ovita Vivanduishi Nova Herero. So war between Germans and our Herero people. And I also need to mention that my paternal grandfather, his father was German, so he was a product of rape. He did not know his father, so which means that in my family line, in my family tree, there is one gap, there is one hole which was never filled, which will never be filled, because I never get to know who was my great-grandfather. So that is that. And also in my professional life, I am a social worker by profession. And social work is a profession that is advancing social justice and human rights. That also influenced me to get involved in the issues of genocide and reparation. Now, to come back to your question as to what motivated me to respond to the invitation from the museum. Of course, in your introduction, you said that for 15 years, I was the chairperson of the Herero and Namibia Genocide Foundation. It tells you that the issues of genocide and reparation occupied my heart for the better part of my youth and adult lives. It was not coincidence that I spent lot of time and energy championing this cause. I traveled long miles or distances across the world and crisscrossing international capitals. I did that because I was campaigning for the heritage of my people. So when the invitation came from the museum, I thought that it's an opportunity that I need to grab with my both hands, because I saw that exhibition as the right platform to advance the Herero and Nama genocide or struggle. The main motivating factor was to present our genocide to the German public and also to the world at large, thanks to the technology. Because living in a digital era, the exhibition, our room, is not only being accessed by the people in Cologne, but everyone from elsewhere can also see our exhibition. And that was a platform that I could not just let slip through my fingers, because I thought that is a very good platform to advance our cause. Our genocide, as you rightly said, is considered to be the first genocide of the 20th century, but is less known, and it is also not acknowledged by many countries, even Germany itself. Now, I want to give an example that in 2013, for example, the total number of museums plus exhibitions, whether they were temporary or permanent, museums and exhibitions that were devoted to the Jewish Holocaust, they were in total 67 in 2013 throughout the world. So that shows that exhibitions are very important things for us to create that continuous education and awareness. So generally, exhibitions are also change agents, because you can use that exhibition to draw the attention of the world to what happened to the Herero and Nama people in 1904, 1908. So those were the reasons why I accepted the invitation, because it's bringing out the voices of the Nama and of Herero descendants, and it's helping us to create neighboring memories, not only with Germany, but also with other countries, because I know that Peju from Nigeria is also curating in one of the rooms. So it is helping us to create that neighbors' memories. And finally, to answer your question, it was also, as much as it is painful, it's also something that I enjoy, because I have never curated any exhibition in my life. But this one, I said, let me grab it, let me do it. I'm enjoying what I'm seeing. I'm very proud of our room. It really looks very impressive. But those are the reasons that motivated me to accept the invitation, to create more awareness, to draw the attention to our genocide, and also to keep the momentum and to keep it alive, because if we don't talk about it, who else will talk about it? I thank you.
Thank you so much, Esther, for sharing this, also for bringing in your family history, the aspect of your family tree, your family heritage, your professional background, your activism, and drawing all of this together to really help us understand more deeply, what motivated you to partake and to curate this exhibition. I think it really shows the depth of feeling of connection, but also the complexity of what we are discussing here today. Now, since you spoke about the lack of recognition of the genocide, before we move on, I would like to ask you a follow-up question, since you are also a key person in Namibian national politics and somebody with a vice ministerial portfolio. I would like to, but at the same time, somebody who has, as you have explained, have been campaigning and advocating for recognition. So given that your background, I would like to find out, what is your current assessment of the German offer to Namibia regarding the idea of reconciliation? And I would like to especially find out how you evaluate this in the current situation, because I'm mindful of the tragedy that key Namibian voices, both in support and also critical of the German offer, have tragically died of COVID recently. So I would like to hear your assessment in that current situation. Would you say that the current situation leads to a reassessment of how the German offer is viewed in Namibia? And do you actually think that the agreement will be finalized, will be signed, and will be ratified by both sides?
Is it over to me?
Yes, please.
Yes, thank you very much again. And let me say that at the beginning of this year, when we officially launched the exhibition, I said, and I want to quote myself, that we are the voices of the Nama and of Herero people. We are the voices of those human remains and skulls that are still in Germany. So it's unfortunate that, as you said, we have lost very important key personalities in the course of the genocide and reparations. But I can assure you that they are going home, they are passing on. It's now even encouraging us more to speak and to talk and be the voices of those skulls, of those human remains, of those who have departed. So hence, we are saying that the UN Convention of 2007 on the rights of the indigenous people is very clear about the role and the participation and involvement of affected communities. And Germany has signed that convention, so they should not ignore it at all. And because of that convention, we are saying it can never be about us without us. Now, coming to your question, the whole issue of this agreement, I want to put it very clear tonight that over Herero and Nama genocide is not different from the Holocaust. There's no difference at all. Why? Because it's about negotiations with the very government of the Federal Republic of Germany. It's about the same issues: genocide, apology, and reparation. So it's not different at all. I can assure you and the listeners that the agreement means nothing at all to us, the descendants, and the descendants of the Nama and of Herero people. Because the one fundamental question that one is always asking is, what is the basis of the negotiations? On what were these negotiations based? Now, Germany has been basing that on the so-called German Bundestag resolutions of 1989 and 2004. What do they say? And I want to say that those resolutions are highlighting 3 points. The first one is Germany's special historic and moral responsibility. What is special? If they can define that, it will help us to understand why is Germany not having a historic special relationship with any other country? Why is it with Namibia? So they need to define that also. The other thing that the resolutions are bringing out is that the course of time, the Federal Republic of Germany has given high priority to building bilateral relations with Namibia since independence. So again, it's based on bilateral relationships. And thirdly, those resolutions also affirm that Namibia being a priority, German development cooperation will be given to Namibia since 1990 after independence. And apparently since then, the German government has allocated more than 500 million euros to finance the development in Namibia. Now, in Namibia, in October 2006, there was also a resolution. What did our resolution say? The resolution in Namibia was talking about Germany should acknowledge that they committed genocide against the Herero and Nama people, that Germany should extend unequivocal apology. That means an apology which is not ambiguous. It should be in very, very clear terms. And thirdly, that Germany should pay reparation to the affected communities. Who are the affected communities in Namibia? It's the Herero and Nama people, because we only know about the intent to destroy them, which was also highlighted in the two extermination orders. Now, given the German resolutions of 1989 and 2006, and the one of Namibia of 2006, these resolutions do not talk to each other at all. The one is talking about bilateral relations, the one is talking about genocide, apology, and reparations. Now, the agreement for us cannot be acceptable because in that agreement, the words genocide and reparation are missing, are not even mentioned in that document at all. The agreement is talking about reconciliation, reconstruction, development aid, and projects. The agreement also talk about an order. Come on, Germany. It was not just an order. It was a Vernichtungsbefehl. Vernichtungsbefehl. In Afrikaans, the word is vernietig. It means destroy. So why are they talking about order? They should talk about an extermination order because that is what it was. So why are they hiding around the bushes? So the agreement also does not speak to the Herero and Nama people in the diaspora, especially in Botswana and South Africa. How would they benefit from this agreement? There's no mention of this. And lastly, in that agreement, one thing that is putting more injury to the already injured people is clause number 10. Clause number 10 is talking about the events that happened in 1904 from today's perspective would be called genocide. Come on, it would be called genocide. It's genocide because I don't want to go to Raphael Lemkin when he coined the word genocide in 1946 or 44. But prior to that, back in the years, 1868, there was another German professor by the name of Blanchy. I hope I say it correctly. And he had written, and I want to quote what he said. He said that wars of extermination and annihilation against peoples and tribes that are capable of life and culture are violations of international law. That was said by a German professor in 1868. So it is very clear that by then, Germany violated international law. The Herero and Nama peoples were capable of life and they had very rich culture. So Germany cannot run away. There's no way they can run away from what they did. Now, the 2006 motion in Namibia Parliament is advocating for a tripartite discussion involving the Namibian government, the German government, and representatives of the Herero and Nama descendants. So what we have seen happening was government to government, bilateral relations. So these were not involving the descendants of these two communities. Now, I don't know whether I should now from this point move into where we are not accepting this offer of 1.1 billion, or should I first stop here?
Yes, I mean, I would like to really thank you for laying this out so clearly for us. And I think, it's a complex matter, but I believe we have understood some of the key points here, both in terms of the mismatch between the Namibian aspirations and the clear demands from the Namibian side in terms of how even such negotiations should be conducted, and versus the way they have been conducted from the German end. You talked about the tripartite idea of negotiations where the government, the organizations of Herero and Nama, and of course the German government should sit at the table together. That has not happened. And I think we can get to some of the other key criticisms later, but the key point here is what you are letting us know and letting us understand is that the agreement as offered by Germany falls short of what our Herero and Nama people have been demanding for decades. And it falls short of what Germany has been able to do in terms of commemorating and taking responsibility for other mass atrocities, namely the ones committed during National Socialism. So thank you for that. Now I would like to move on to another guest speaker, to Sam Geiseb, because we've now heard very clearly some of the criticisms. Now, given your work with the Nama Genocide Technical Committee, I would like to understand, how do you evaluate the developments in recent months and weeks, that is after the German offer has been made and has become public? Would you say that there's a shift in the way these issues are being discussed in Namibia in the aftermath of the offer, where the criticism has been loud and clear that the offer is insufficient? So would you say that there has been a shift in the way these issues are being discussed in Namibia after the offer has been made? And again, of course, in the current context of Corona, given the linkages we spoke about earlier. Sam, the floor.
Thank you for the opportunity. At the onset, I want to formally submit an apology from Honorable Ida Hoffman, who could not join the session. She certainly appreciated the opportunity to be part of the curating team, and is certainly appreciative of the experience she has gained there. Notwithstanding, let me come back to what you basically asked me to respond to. I think what is critical to understand is that the bilateral negotiations from the onset have failed the critical test that defines how we have seen and approached what should be the ideal negotiations around genocide. As the slogan says, nothing about us without us. We have not been part of it, and therefore it is immaterial for us even to discuss an agreement. We were not part of a process that basically realized that agreement, and we have categorically rejected the agreement as far as the representatives of the descendants are concerned. We have also not departed from what we have originally demanded as the due process for arriving at an agreement that hopefully lays to rest the negotiations that should have started ages ago, but have continued without the participation of the representative of the affected communities. And just to latch on to what Esther was saying, our demands, and more so our expectations, have not changed just because a few of those that were leading, so to say, the genocide cause are no longer with us. In fact, it has just strengthened our resolve to keep fighting on. in the aftermath has the discussions changed? No, not for the affected communities, as far as I'm concerned. In fact, we stand firmly with our previous demands, and I think what we some of the discussions that we hear were about whether it's about whether it's about the money. I think when you actually follow what we've been discussing since for the last 2 decades, primarily around genocide, we have firmly requested to be part of the discussions, to be able to sit on the table, and so it is not so much about the final bill that everybody is hyped up about, whether it's about 1.8 billion, notwithstanding. The aftermath is firmly focused a lot on discussing whether what was offered was enough, whether the process that is proposed in the agreement is sufficient or not, and it is not. Right from the start, we have not been party to the discussions, and therefore our voices are not reflected in that agreement. And this is a process for which we do not only blame the German government. In fact, we also blame the Namibian government for having proceeded with these bilateral negotiations without the participation of affected communities. We have had a number of opportunities when we have engaged on how we could, in fact, effect that participation. But as we know, the offers were made early this year, and we were not part of those discussions. That is where we stand. As far as we're concerned, maybe for those that are part of the governmental delegations, the discussions may have changed, and maybe their demands have changed. But for us, who are representatives of the affected communities, it has not changed, and we still demand. And as far as we're concerned, the agreement, the so-called agreement that the two governments have either concluded or are concluding, are not sustainable, because affected communities are not part of it and have rejected it as something that is not acceptable. So what I want to basically emphasize is the fact that for affected communities, until such time that we become part of the discussions that discusses the key issues of apology, acknowledgement. When you actually look at the different aspects of it, even acknowledgement is not just it's not just Germany saying we acknowledge. I mean, what are they acknowledging? Me and you both know that in Germany, people don't actually even know about this genocide. So what does Germany acknowledge as genocide? That discussion has to take place. It's not a matter of just them telling us we killed so many numbers and so many people. I mean, the acknowledgement has to be genuine in the sense that it extrapolates what happened to our people. What do you apologize for? What would present day Germans say their government is apologizing for and paying for, if indeed they do pay? And therefore, the account of atrocities that were committed, it needs to be laid bare so that Germany knows what happened. Present day Germany knows what it is about. Why is this why is Germany acknowledging genocide, and why therefore are we talking about reparations in a way we do? And for all intents and purposes, nothing has changed for the affected communities if we look at 2021. In fact, just in your introductory remarks, Joshua, you were saying we are talking about 70% of land that is still owned by white descendants of white minority settlers. These figures have not changed for many of us. In fact, we are landless, still dispossessed. So people may be talking about something that happened 100 years ago, but we're still feeling those effects today. And in fact, this is why we fundamentally think it is justified for us to demand reparations, because without reparations, how are we going to redress these injustices that were there? And that is only for what we have physically lost, besides the human losses and other things that we're talking about. So in the aftermath for descendants, to be honest, nothing has changed. We have not changed what we're discussing. We have not changed what we're demanding, nor are we prepared to move away from what we perceive to be the due process and the end result that we want to see, that we think is part of what we want to see as restorative justice. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Sam, for laying this out so clearly, and also for reminding us that, as you have said, there has to be deep and conceptual participation of the descendants of the representatives of Herero and Nama to even be able to approximate this key term that you mentioned in the end, restorative justice, right? So it's about a kind of justice that rectifies imbalances, right? And clearly, as you have laid out, the agreement that is on the table is not nearly seen as being able to secure that. Now, I would like to move on to a next guest, and that would be Israel. Now, Israel, I would like to ask you a question in the light of your decades-long advocacy and activism for the cause we're debating here in Germany. And I want to ask you, following up on what Sam said, because it seems that there's a contradiction within the German offer. So on the one hand, publicly, Foreign Minister Maas and many other government representatives are very cautious to keep repeating that this agreement should not be understood as, the final line underneath this historical debate. It should not be what Germans like to call a Schlussstrich. It should not be the final argument that closes future engagements. However, on the other hand, it seems that the agreement itself actually does try to draw a final line, certainly under future juridical engagement, by saying that all future claims should be foreclosed once this agreement is signed and ratified. And so there seems to be a contradiction there. I would like to hear your assessment of it, especially also because you have been working in Germany tirelessly for decades to raise awareness of this issue, even at a time when Germany more forcefully rejected to even call this a genocide. So it seems that at the symbolic level now, there's a lot of gesturing towards accepting the fact that it was genocide, while, which, I mean, we mustn't forget, has been routinely denied for decades, right? But the question is there, do you sense a willingness in Germany, in terms of German officials, to address these issues beyond the symbolism of, accepting the term genocide without actually moving into the issue of addressing material injustices? So again, how do you square the tensions between the idea of Schlussstrich or no Schlussstrich, final line or no final line? And do you consider the current debate moving beyond the symbolic from the German side? Or would you say, well, beyond the gesturing, there is little that indicates that we are moving beyond symbolism of acceptance? Israel, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. So I would like to start with my biography, but not, because the time is running. So I left my country in 1964 when I was 17 years old. I joined the liberation movement. I was a member of SWANU, still a member of SWANU, actually fighting the apartheid system. So when I came to Germany, I was really, I knew about the historical background before the apartheid system. But the genocide history I was not so aware of it. Secondly, my grandmother was also abused through the German soldiers or Schutztruppen. That's why is my color a little bit lighter than any African in this room. So for me, it was a challenge to say what happened to my grandmother and so on and so on. So when I came to West Berlin, I was active in the anti-apartheid movement, and Namibia got free. So the question was what to do, what happened to my people, to my ancestors in German Southwest Africa. So it was the genocide. And so that's why I started to engage myself for the reparation, for the apology, and especially in the first time. Thirdly, we started with the first documentary film, the war against the Herero people. So that's where I started. This is how I started with my activities in Germany up to now. And as all my friends from Uchi and Geiseb, as they said the story, but I don't want to repeat, because I think Germany is fooling us, because we cannot accept this deal between the German government and our government, because our government has nothing to say. This is just a puppet government. Everything is dictated from Germany. So our struggle, this is not the end of the struggle, because firstly, the most important thing is that we lost our land, our ancestral land. The cultural properties are here in Germany. As Esther said, our ancestors are here in museum everywhere in Germany, So this thing is really painful for us. And I think we cannot accept this deal between Germany and our puppet government in Namibia, because our government, they are not legitimate to represent us in the first place. Secondly, as my friend said, we were not invited to be a part of this deal. So how can we accept this agreement? Yeah, this is me myself personally in Germany. I'm engaged since 2004 in different ways, informing in schools, in media and so on, because this game is the beginning, is in the middle. Well, I would like to say is 10 past 12, 12:30, no guarantee. I don't know what's going to happen, because the younger generation, they don't have this patience like we do, because they are getting radicaler, because our land is still occupied by the Germans, as Comrade Saipeb said. 60 up to 70% of our land is in the hands of the Germans. Our people are landless. Can you imagine? You are in a country and you don't have even a home. And some of them are in diaspora. Those who left the country because of the extermination of Olota von Trotha, they are in South Africa. They are in Botswana. And their land, where their forefathers used to live, is occupied by the Germans. How can we agree to this to this nonsense agreement between these two governments. So I don't want to, the story is like that. We are trying everything, especially in Germany, renaming streets and all these kind of things. But our main demands are apology, and apology, recognition, and reparation, not development aid. What's happened to the development aid 30 years ago? I didn't see, up to now, I didn't see any project in Namibia for the interest of our communities, whether Tamara, Herero, Nama, or whatever. We are one. And, the extermination order was against the Hereros and the Namas, but they were Tamaras, they were San too. They were also killed by the Germans. So this reparation is not only for us as Herero and Namas, but for those who used to have also who lost their land or whatever in former German South West Africa. So this kind of deal between the two governments, we will never accept that, and we will fight till we get our land back. You can do what you want with the 1 billion euros. It's not our business, it's the business of the Namibian government. So we don't trust this government, and our fight will continue. And to come to another point, how can we trust this government if now they are fracking in Okavango, destroying our paradise, Okavango? They are drilling oil, gas, and whatever. What's going to happen with those people who are living around Okavango? We're talking about CO2, or wie das heißt,
Yeah, CO2 emissions.
Yeah. So this government is not working in the interest of the Namibian people. We see what's happening in Okavango. So thank you, but we are going to continue our fight. Me, personally, I'm at the frontier in Berlin, and I will give everything I can till I maybe leave this world. Thank you.
Thank you, Israel, for sharing your perspective, and also for including your biography, your long journey, and helping us understand how your biography is also impacted by, but also how you have reshaped your experience in decades of struggle against apartheid, which, as we have also learned from you, is kind of the follow-on regime to the colonial regime. And we note that the imbalance of land ownership persisted from the colonial time through apartheid to this very day, leading to the need to continue the struggle, as you have stressed. Now, speaking of land, I would like to direct my next question to Vakuma Hengari, and that is because you, Vakuma, are, among other roles, also a farmer. And as we have just heard so clearly from Israel, land is at the heart of the current and long-running controversy. And I would like to ask you, can you please help us understand the magnitude of the uneven distribution, the magnitude of the injustice, and by helping us understand the meanings of land for the affected communities, for whom clearly it is far more than just a commodity. So please help us understand the meaning of land in the contemporary controversy.
Yes, thank you, Kwesi, and thank you to everyone who is listening. Let me start out by giving a background of the land dispossession process in Namibia. After Germany arrived officially in 1884 to colonize, they started to approach the locals to acquire land. Land, as we know it traditionally, was a commodity was not a commodity that one could sell. It was a heritage. It was part of livelihood. It was part of culture. And it is part of ancestry. Ancestry, particularly in our case, the Herero and Banderu people. Last weekend, digress a bit, we were burying my niece or my brother's daughter, who happened to have been a colleague of Utjiua's, a fellow deputy minister. And we had the pleasure of having the president grace the occasion of a burial in the communal area where we are now settled. And what struck me as we were sitting there is the fact that the most senior people from our family who's buried there is my grandfather. Because in 1923, when people moved to the reserves, when they were moved out of concentration camps, the camps closed in 1908. They all retreated to where they found themselves after the war ended. And the succeeding regime of South Africa, which succeeded Germany in 1915, in 1923, continued to implement the reservation proclamation that was proclaimed by Germany in 1896, essentially. So my grandfather was among the people who settled at this village where we buried my brother's daughter, who was a deputy minister. And what I spoke about earlier, I said land represents part of our ancestry, because in our culture and tradition or religion, people don't die to disappear. They leave this lively earth and move into the spiritual realm. So you intend them to a place that you can relate to. Now, colonialism and land dispossession cut that link between us and our ancestors. My grandfather did not return to his father or his grandfather at the time of his passing in 1968, because where he found himself was a very strange place, and he had to be buried there because he couldn't return to a place north of Okahanja where his dad was buried and his grandfather were buried. And up to now, we have no access to that. And we have now started a new place in the village of Aminus. So land, to us, had significant and far-reaching meanings. It was not a commodity. It was part of us. It was cultural. It was spiritual. Yes, it was home as well. To the Herero and Banderu, the thing that defines us, even if you go to our folklore songs and praises, we would talk of the land, the place. We would talk of our cattle. Cattle and land are linked in a manner that one cannot describe, because cattle live and thrive on land. You graze them. And where cattle went, that is why when we talk of land, it had no clear boundaries, because it was as far as our livestock could go. And depending on the period or season of the year, if it was during the rainy season, you had water all over and you had, grazing all over. Cattle could graze within a radius of say 10 to 15, 5 to 10 kilometers. When it became dry and you had wells and fountains and pans of water 20, 50, or 30 kilometers away, you would trek behind the animals. And that is why, as much as the Herero people were located in the central areas, they were, during the early 1800s already, they could reach as far as the Orange River, or as far as in what is present-day Kansi in Botswana today. Following, and depending on the conditions of grazing, they could then go as far as grazing would, require them to go, because they would follow their cattle. So land to us, as I said, meant livelihood, meant identity. When you talk of the people, if you talk of our Kwachi, like she and Madam Muinjangue, when someone starts to describe them, they would link them to a particular piece or area in Namibia. They would link them to a particular head of cattle, because each one of us culturally has the cattle that you would traditionally farm with, whether they are white and black, or red, or black, or brownish, whatever. You also had to do that. And whether they had long horns or short horns, it is that what would define us. So land, as we know it today, was decreed. The loss of land by our people, both Herero and Nama, was decreed by German colonial administrators. In 1906, for example, there was a decree that came, that was right in the middle of the war, that the Herero Baderu would have forfeited all land and animals that they owned. And it became a capital offense. If you were found with anything called life, something animal, whether it was a dog, a goat, or a sheep, or cattle, because those now became property of the Kaiser's representatives here. All land that we owned was decreed, was confiscated by a decree, and became what was termed crown land, and was then used by the authorities to settle the German settlers who came here. So of the federal land that we owned, all of it was gone. Some measure of effort had to be made to make sure that we were pushed to the periphery of what used to be the natural areas where we settled naturally because of
Okay, I think unfortunately the connection there is a bit unstable there at the moment to Makumba and Kambanda. It has happened before and they have been able to come back. So I would hope that they would be able to rejoin us shortly. Yeah, in the meantime, as we are hopefully awaiting their return, I would like to ask a question to all of you. Following up on the in-depth understanding that you have given us and the audience in terms of the history, the way the history is intertwined with your personal biographies, the facets of struggle with intergenerationally, the aspect of land ownership, the fact that land was far more than a commodity in Herero and Nama culture, politics, identity, and cosmovision. So as you have laid out all these different facets, and of course helps us to understand more clearly the problems with the current German offer, I would now like to ask you since, you know, we're speaking to mostly German audience at this moment. So what would you say, what are your expectations, you know, of a German audience, of German civil society, given the current situation? What role should German civil society play in the future engagement on this issue?
Should I respond?
Yes,
Maybe
please.
yeah.
Yes. Very sorry for that.
Oh, no problem. We are happy that you are back with us. Sam was just about to answer
Unmute.
a question. Yes, you're unmuted.
Unmuted.
Yes, you're unmuted and we
Unmute.
can hear and
My
see you
bad.
clearly. So I would suggest you mute yourself for the moment so that Sam can answer. Afterwards, I will.
Can you please?
Yes. So you have to mute yourself. Maybe the technical assistants can also help by remote muting. Yeah, thank you. You're muted at this moment. Thank you. So I would invite Sam to speak.
Sorry, we got lost and we are back now.
Yes, thank you for returning.
Yeah.
Joshua, shall I speak?
Sam, the floor is yours. Yes.
Okay. You spoke about the role of civil society. I think the since let me say since the 2006 resolution, the parliamentary resolution, and the aftermath of what happened with the return of skulls, some of the artifacts and so on, what we have seen significantly happening is for instance, German civil society bringing to the fore quite a bit of the cost of genocide to the German populace out there. I think a key role of civil society has to be about raising awareness out there, because we believe they almost constitute the voice of reason that could make sure that the entire populace out there is informed about genocide for a start. Every time you hear different commentators speak, it's always about, I mean, people don't actually really know much about the Nama Herero genocide of the 1908-1905. So it's critical that the information is shared that raises the necessary awareness. Of course, civil society also has a critical role in terms of advocacy. And in that respect, it has to engage the powers that be on doing the right thing and doing what we are referring to commonly as restorative justice, committing to restorative justice, and making sure that that value that civil society brings in terms of making sure that there is a participatory process, that there is participation ensured for the representatives of descendants of victims. So for me, those are the critical roles that we kind of expect from civil society to, if you like, keep the fire burning, make sure that everybody's informed, but more specifically also engage the powers that be on addressing those historical wrongs that we're talking about. And Bakuma, then we're talking about land. I just want to give. I'm sure he will come back to that. But I just want to give you one example. We have 14 regions in Namibia, and one region is Hardap region, for instance. In Hardap region, we have over 4,000 commercial farms. In the last 30 years, the government of the Republic of Namibia has, I think, only been able to buy back about 66 farms for resettlement purposes. Now, part of the reason why we also reject the agreement, and perhaps the price tag, if you want to call it that, is that that money is not even going to be able to buy back Hardap region, for that matter, or the farms that are there. So if we talk about restorative justice, to what extent will what is currently offered actually help us address the issues of land dispossession? And I think this is where we start. And this is just one aspect of what we think needs to be restored. So that was just a bit digressing, but I'm sure Bakuma will speak to further on the issue. What for me is critical is that the voices of civil society don't go silent. It is critical that they become more amplified. It is critical that they become more engaging, and that they provide opportunity, of course, that they continue to provide opportunity as they've done in the past, for us to be able to actually engage the German populace out there on issues of restorative justice, which we believe is critical.
Right. Yeah, thank you for sharing some very, very clear expectations in terms of what the Germans can do and should continue to be doing. Now, before we open the floor to the audience to also ask questions and engage in discussion, I would like to pose my last question to Kambanda Nokokure Veii. And in doing so, I would like to pick up on what we have heard earlier from Israel, and also a little bit now from Bakuma when we talked about the land issue. My question is, Bakuma, to you, since you work with youth, you run programs with young people, I'm interested to understand how do you see the way this issue is dealt with by the younger generation in Namibia, the younger generation specifically of Herero and Nama, the descendants of those who have been dispossessed, the communities that have been affected by the genocide and dispossession. And I'm asking this because Israel hinted at the fact that, a younger generation might take a different approach. We have also heard about the pressing issue of land and the magnitude of the injustice. So please share with us from your engagement with the different generation, how they tackle this issue. Also keeping in mind that, of course, if we zoom out and look at the region of Southern Africa, there are several countries where a young generation is making very clear demands when it comes to land redistribution in the context of dispossession during colonial times, dispossession during apartheid. So what is the situation in Namibia regarding the younger generation?
Okay, thank you very much, Joshua. And thanks for having me. Good evening to the audience out there. Can you hear me clearly? Okay.
Yes, I can hear you clearly. Thank you.
Okay. Before I attempt to answer your question, please allow me to also voice my concern over the agreement between the two governments and the declaration.
Sure, please do.
Yeah. I would like to share something. Genocide to some of us is very, very personal. I was also brought up by my great-grandmother, who was a genocide survivor. And it was not pleasant. She was always a quiet woman. And she would often sit by the side of the house and cry. And me, as a young child, never understood what it was all about. And whenever I go to her and ask why she was crying, she would just chase me away and tell me to go and play. Until I grew up, until I knew about the genocide, until I understood her situation. So many of us were brought up by people who were traumatized to what happened to their families back then. Now, Joshua, we have lost a lot. We have lost lives, we have lost land, we have lost an identity, we have lost our culture, our language, especially for those who are in the diaspora. We have lost a lot. And like Sam said, it's not something that you can put monetary value to, right? It's priceless, but it does not mean that money does not matter. Because in order to restore a people, you will need funds to do so. Now, what has been offered in this agreement between the two governments is a slap in the face of us and of our ancestors. This document, like Esther said, does not speak to the descendants at all. It is using a different language. It is naming things differently. The extermination order is referred to as an order. Genocide is referred to as atrocities. Reparations is referred to as developmental aid or whatever. So we are not part of this. From the onset, when these two governments came together, they did things totally wrong. Everything is wrong about it. Because they did not involve the descendants. They still went ahead and negotiated on things that half the time we did not even know what they were negotiating on. I remember a year or so ago, the late Namibian envoy saying that they are trying to figure out what to call these atrocities. And that was shocking. After about 5-6 years of negotiating, they still did not know what they are negotiating on. So this document to me is pure trash. Sorry to use the word, but it's how I see it. So we are not part of it. There is no way that we are going to sit and even talk about it until the two governments involve us, like they accepted, like the Namibian government accepted and voted anonymously on the 2006 resolution that was tabled by our late Paramount Chief Kwaimari Rwako, that we need to sit at the table. Now, apart from on top of everything that we have lost, we are denied the opportunity to heal by denying us to talk, to negotiate with the Germans. We are denied an opportunity to find closure to all this. After over 100 years ago, we never had an opportunity to be healed. We were never offered any healing. We never found any closure. Because like Bakuma has said earlier, many of our ancestors, many of our great-grandfathers, great-grandmothers are in unmarked graves. We don't know where they are buried, which is something very, very important in our culture. Many of them are buried on farms that are owned by whites and where you need to ask for permission to enter, which might be denied. So all these cultural rituals that we usually do when someone has departed and so on, we are being denied. So when are we going to heal? When are we going to find closure? When the Namibian government and the Germans still continue to hurt us, my question is, what have we done so badly that we should be treated this way? Now, I get very emotional when I'm talking about this. I'm sorry about that. To come back to the land issue and the youth, Israel put it correctly when he said that the youth, they are more radical. They want action. They have seen things happening. They have been involved in genocide talks, deliberations, and so on. And especially, we have a constant date, or what can I put it? Dates for commemorations. Mm-hmm. about five times a year, where we go to different sites to commemorate and to pay homage to our heroes who were killed in a genocide. And young people are going to these events. So they are learning more. And they want their land back. Mind you, we are talking about land, our inheritance that was robbed from us. We are talking about whites here in Namibia enriching themselves on the land that their forefathers stole from us. Now, if I tell my daughter or my son that here is where our grandfather lived or our grandparents lived, but we don't have access to that anymore. They are buried there, but we cannot go there. The farm belongs to somebody else. And that's where we start the conversation of the history of how the land was dispossessed in the first place. And a young person will get angry, more angrier than I think the older generation, because I think we don't have the same kind of energy anymore. I know Israel said he will continue fighting until the last, I don't know, it's the same here, we will continue fighting, but the difference is that our younger people, the younger generation, it is more radical, they are more aggressive. They are talking about, Germans, remember that land that you took from us is not in Berlin, it's here in Namibia. So, you know what that means, right? So they are taking a totally complete, totally different approach. They want things done and done fast. So I don't know whether that answers your question, but yeah.
Yes, thank you. And thank you also for making, sharing your perspectives and also making clear that there are strong emotions. I mean, there is suffering. It has to do with material dispossession, but it also has to do with being cut off of ancestral land, right? And you also shared with us the ways in which these things are commemorated, the culture of commemoration around it, and made clear that this is also a link between generations, I mean, different approaches notwithstanding, and that you two are committed to see this fight through to a better resolution than what is currently on the table. So thank you for this. Now with that, I would now like to, once again, thank all of you for sharing with you the depth of your struggle, your analysis, your expertise, and also clearly the emotion and the dedication that come with this. Because like I said in the beginning, we're not just talking about dry facts here, we're talking about lived realities, collective experience, and an intergenerational struggle that lasts to this very day. So thank you for sharing this with us. And with that said, I would now like to open the floor for questions from the audience, both in the museum and with us online.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you all for the conversation. I'm thinking how to proceed because we have some questions in the Q&A, but also I was wondering maybe to ask all of you, what's the actual situation? Because like in Germany, we haven't heard about the agreement since May. So what's the actual stand? What's your information about it? Maybe all of you can answer.
Okay.
Yeah, Esther, maybe you can start.
Okay, thank you very much. It's very interesting to hear that the agreement is not much talked about in Germany. It's very funny, yeah? Because it's coming from there. How come it's not so much being discussed on that side? But I want to, before I say what I want to say, I want to refer to what your foreign minister, Heiko Maas, said on the 28th of May. He said that as a gesture of recognition of the immeasurable suffering that was inflicted. Now, I want to stop there. When he says it's a gesture, it's a sign, it's a token. We are not asking for a token. We are not asking for a gesture. We are demanding what is just. Germany committed genocide, and they are not doing us a favor to give us a gesture of 1.1 billion. Now, if you take, and also, what is also annoying is the fact that recently, the German government renovated a castle, a palace, which was once the house of hosting the Kaiser who was responsible for our genocide. They spent 700 million euros to renovate that. That means 400 euros less than the 1.1 billion. Yes. Now that shows that they are so willing to spend a lot of money to renovate a building. Now, let me also just say that if we just for a moment try to ignore the time value of money, the offer of Germany result into 36.7 million euros per year. I don't know whether that is a coincidence or was it by design, because that is exactly equal to the amount of the annual development that Germany has previously paid to Namibia since independence. So there is a snake in the grass here, and we should not be taken for granted. I want to go on and say that we understand that initially, from the side of Namibian government, they put on the table an amount of 1.26 trillion, which is approximately 75 billion euros. But the German government came with a counter offer of 300 million euros. Now, if you take the 1.1, it means that Germany only moved up 3.7 times, whereas Namibia moved down 68.2 times. That is so one-sided negotiations. And that is why, from the start, we have been saying these negotiations are not genuine and not transparent. And I'm happy that the foreign minister, Heiko Maas, is acknowledging the immeasurable suffering. Immeasurable means it's massive, it's big. So German government must really take it back, or if they continue and they sign, it must be understood that we are not asking a gesture. We are not asking a favor. We are demanding restorative justice. And we know that in the time of the Jews, there was this man with the name of, what was his name? Dr. Nahum Gottman. When the Jews were not happy and the leaders of Israel were not happy with what was offered to them, Gottman negotiated with Adenauer. And then the Wassenaar negotiations were put to halt. The claims conference was put to halt, and they started to renegotiate. So it can be done. Germany has put the precedent And that is what we are asking for, to be at the table and to speak for ourselves. And in that process, also get the opportunity to get rid of that emotional pain that we have. Because if you read a lot of books on the Holocaust, they talk about transgenerational trauma. We are suffering from that. So let us be at the table, speak for ourselves, and get that opportunity also to heal from what we are inflicted by through that genocide or genocidal activities or events that were carried against our people. So maybe I should stop here for now and give others. Oh, no, before I stop, maybe I will not get another chance. With the Jewish case also, Konrad Adenauer made it in the Bundestag. He made a public statement that Germany will take full responsibility and pay for reparation. Now, why I'm saying there is a snake in the grass here is the fact that they want the agreement to first come to the Namibian parliament for ratification. We hear nothing about it being taken to the Bundestag. When are they taking it to the Bundestag to be ratified also? What will bind? What will make it binding for the German government if it is not ratified in their Bundestag? I will stop there. Otherwise, I'm getting angry now also.
Yeah, thank you.
Want to continue?
Now I see that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see that Kambanda's and Makumba's hand is up.
Yeah, thank you. Just can I come in?
Please, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. On this declaration, Joshua, the heading, the title of the declaration is already problematic to many of us. It says, united in remembrance of our colonial past. United, who is united here? And how are we united in the remembrance of our colonial past? What are they doing to remember that? They have not put anything in place. I have been to Berlin many, many times, and I have never seen monuments or memorials on the Herero and Nama genocides. Am I still there?
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Because I'm seeing Esther instead of myself here. Yeah.
We can see and hear you clearly.
How are we united in that? And then it says again, united in our will to reconcile. Whose will? Who are we talking about here? Are we talking about the Namibian government and the German government only? Or are we also talking about the descendants? Because this document should be descendant if it was a genuine one. And united in our vision for the future, or our vision of the future, whatever that means. Is it the vision of the future? Is it the 1.3 billion over a 30-year period? Or what is it? What are we talking about here? So the Germans are truly not genuine, and they are just taking us for a ride. And what I do not understand is why our government is allowing themselves to be used by the Germans in such a way. I really, truly do not, I fail to understand that. And I fail to understand that in this negotiating team, there were descendants of the Herero and Nama people. And they truly came and agreed to this. Was it because of the money that they were getting from both governments, or what? Because that to me is betrayal of the highest order. And as I have mentioned before, Uchi just took out of what I wanted to say, especially about this agreement being tabled in the Namibian parliament like we had on the 7th of September, and not in the Bundestag. So I also wanted to raise that. Why does it come to our parliament? Why is it coming to our cabinet to be discussed and ratified, and not in the Bundestag? And what is it that is binding the Germans to this? So this truly should be torn up and it should be thrown in a toilet where it belongs. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your answer. Sam, do you want to continue?
Yeah, just want to maybe add a different dimension. I think it is futile to discuss an agreement which, as we said, by first principles, is something that we've not been party to. We have not scripted the agreement. We have not contributed in any way to its intent and content. And therefore, the agreement is meaningless for many descendants of victims. I think what is critical is how do we go forward, because we are not discussing this agreement here in Namibia. Descendants of victims are not discussing this agreement because it is absolutely an agreement that means nothing to us. It will not address the issues that in the first instance led us to raise this cause and to carry this cause. When people talk about victims, you know, in Namibia, if I could give you an example, for instance, I think somebody made reference to it. This is a country that is littered with the bones of victims of genocide. We don't know where some of our ancestors are lying. What we know is that some of them are caught up in these farms that we cannot access, and for cultural and traditional reasons, those linkages have been destroyed ages ago. People are saying that this is something that happened 100 years ago. So we know that the land that we talk about is land that has empowered generations of Germans that are sitting on that land. In fact, they are the owners of our economy because of genocide, because of what happened 100 years ago. These are people who have their hands on the economy of Namibia. Generations are still sitting and benefiting from it. In fact, there are kids that are being sent back and forth to Germany still from Namibia, being paid for by money that is generated from that land. I want to give you a small example. I'm an aspiring farmer. If you drive, and you may not know for reference sake, but if you drive from here to 70 kilometers southeast, say to Dorlabis, it's you are going to find maybe 20 commercial farms owned by 20 families, just in an enclave on less than 600 hectares of land. And there are over maybe 120 households sitting. Yeah? For 70 kilometers, you have 20 commercial farms owned by possibly 20 families. And in some small enclave, which is about 600 hectares, you have over 120 households sitting, trying to farm. And by the way, I'm also sitting on that land, which is, by the way, disputed. And it makes absolutely no sense. When I drive, every time I get a chance, I drive down that road, I don't even see cattle along the road. That's how big these farms are. Yet we are sitting on 600 hectares, fighting each other for grazing. This is what we are talking about. We are talking about the majority of Namibians not being able to access land that is economically empowering, land that has for generations empowered Germans who are descendants of the perpetrators. You see, these are the scenarios we have to live with every day. And in fact, you talk about the youth. These are the things that anger you. People are talking about we're not instigating anybody. We're simply saying these are stark realities that are confronting Namibian youth, and they are becoming impatient. How long is this still going to continue? And this agreement that we are talking about has done absolutely nothing. In fact, it has not done anything in terms of addressing some of these issues that we are speaking to. For many Germans, present-day Germans, this may be in the historical past, but for us, it's present-day reality. That we have no access to land in the country of our birth. And people who are not from here are people who actually have access to land. These are some of the issues that confront us every day. And for the Namibian government to even think about accepting that type of agreement, I mean, it's unthinkable. How are we beyond this agreement supposed to address these issues? This agreement should be part of the solution, trying to help us to address these historical injustices. And what our government is thinking of signing is simply going nowhere close to addressing 1% of what needs to be addressed in terms of restorative justice. And I'll stop there.
I think if one has to add on to that, the agreement or the declaration that is to be tabled in our National Assembly reached between our government and the government of the Federal Republic of Germany has at best done a few things, all of which are not good to us in Namibia, but more specifically to us as the affected communities. It has divided our people further into those who are for and those that are against this agreement. It has turned our young politicians, those that are part of the ruling political elite, into what one can call, I don't know, I don't want to use harsh words, but they are the ones that are running to try and sell what cannot be sold to their own parents, their own communities, something that clearly undermines the very aspirations and the basis of any semblance of restorative justice, which we have been yearning to. For 20 some odd years after we became reinvigorated and trying to pursue this restorative justice, the government of the Republic of Namibia has been very, very indifferent to our fate as descendants of the victims, being political ethnic minorities in an ethnocratic society by and large. We were neglected on this matter. For 30 years that we have been around in this independent republic, there has not been any single memorialization attempt of our genocide. There is no memorial, as we are speaking today, that is dedicated to this genocide. There is no public holiday declared. There is no textbook in Namibia that has a chapter on this genocide. And that is why it takes the gut out of yourselves if one tries to imagine why today we should believe that the government is the best possible champion for our cause. If in 30 years nothing was done, the only thing that was done on this genocide was to come and usurp the role of the victims and usurp it to ends that are not coming any closer to fulfilling the aspirations and or creating anything that would come closer to building a transition from these people that are in these destitute conditions that we find ourselves in. I spoke earlier about what land means to us. Some just spoke about the fact that today we are being confined to places that were foreign and alien to us. Places that are home or were home to us before 1904 to 1908 have now become strange land to us. Yet today we are being convinced by our politicians that we should accept this as the best possible solution that we could get, when there is not even a clear inclusion in that document of anything that talks about land restitution. There was a presidential commission on ancestral land rights claims and restitution thereof. The report came out, but we are yet to hear a clear commitment from the top of our structure, political structure, the president, downwards to all the ministries, that report has created a new vision, because the very same topic, there was a big fight to make that a thematic topic at the second land conference, because two of our former presidents openly objected to that very issue being discussed at the land conference. That is why we currently still doubt whether the resolution and the report of that president, the Presidential Commission, would have anything to piggyback on if the current agreement that we have seen is anything to go by. And therefore, for us as victims or descendants of the victims, who continue to suffer this trauma, who have this transgenerational, deprivation of equity, of culture, of social fabrics and structures that were annihilated and destroyed by German colonialism and the subsequent genocide, who have families that are across the border in Botswana and South Africa, who have, nothing to go to as that reflect how we used to live. If we can not correct this agreement, then it is as good as us continuing to fight alongside or outside of this framework. And I think that is really what it means to us. The agreement does not address us. It talks of projects. It doesn't talk of people. It talks of political regions. It doesn't talk of communities. It talks of government to government. It doesn't talk of victims. So anything or everything and everything about and in that agreement has everything that makes it unacceptable to those of us that are direct descendants and who continue to seek restorative justice. So I think on that agreement, that's what we can say. Finally, on my side, on that issue.
Thank you so much for your answer. And maybe you can.
Well, I think everything is said by comrades. The same. I've the same opinion. So I think it's all right. Yeah.
But do you have a different view living here?
Well. What I wanted to add to this $1.1 billion. So as we know that the German government or Mr. Spahn spent about 1 billion euro for masks. Can you imagine this? The 1.1 billion for this deal, and you're only for mask 1 billion euro. This is ridiculous, and and I think we cannot discuss all the time about this deal, the negotiations between the two governments, because we don't accept that. So we have to go forward and continue with our strategy. That's all. If we don't want to waste time with this discussion of negotiation, German and the Namibian government, because the Namibian government, they are just serving, it's a part of, actually it's a part of Germany. Namibia is now a federal, you know, you can say Namibia is a part of this federal system of Germany. So we go our way and try to fix the way we want. Our people who are in diaspora, and for the Hereros and the Nama people who lost their ancestral land, which is very important. Ancestral land is very, very important for us as human beings and as who lost our land. It's very important. And as long as I'm here in Germany, I will do all my best and fight for our cause.
Thank you for that. Thank you for saying that and sharing all of you, your positions in, like, from where you're from, like where your experience come from. And also thank you the public on the chat that they were like chatting all the time and like giving references. And it's all, we ask if you have questions. It's already a bit late, but I would like to thank you again. All the discussants here, Sam, Esther, Israel, thank you for coming. Kamanda, Joshua, thank you so much for being here today. And we will make available an online version of the video of the conversation online in German and in English for all the people to understand and get your words. And if you want to, this event is part of the exhibition Resist, the Art of Resistance, and you can access material on the website, and there is a conversation between Esther Muinjangue and Nanette Snoop about the exhibition space and also about the struggle of Nama and Herero people in Namibia and here. So thank you so much. And Esther, do you want to say some words before finishing?
Yes, please. I want to say my final remarks, and I want to leave the audience with a quote from Grossman, as cited by Rautenstrauch and Rautenstrauch. And I want to read that quote, and I want to leave the audience with that quote. The quote reads as follows: "The Luxembourg agreements set a precedent in international law. The German government had negotiated not only with representatives of Israel, which had no diplomatic relations with Germany, but recognized representatives of the world Jewry, thereby recognizing that the Jewish people as a whole had suffered grave injury resulting from Nazi persecution and were legally entitled to compensation." So I want to say, Frau Merkel and your government, or whoever will take over from her in September. At the beginning, I said, the Holocaust is not different from the Nama and of Herero genocide. Therefore, the German government should treat the Herero and Nama descendants the same way their predecessors treated the Jewish. I thank you very much for the opportunity. I thank you that you created this platform so that we can add our voices and continue the struggle. And as my colleague said, a luta continua, because we are demanding reparation and not a token, but reparation for genocide that was committed. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Esther. Thank you, Kwesi, for the wonderful moderation. Do you want to add some words, say goodbye?
I would just like to really thank all the panelists for your time, your insight, dedication, and for allowing us to really go deeper by sharing your experience in the Namibian context, letting us understand the meaning of land, the meaning of the struggle in your lives. So thank you so much for this. And all I can say is I want to maybe close with one of the audience members who said in the chat, Louise Adams said there, your perseverance in your struggle for restorative justice is admirable. And I can only agree. Thank you for sharing this with us. I hope that we, especially also the audience listening from Germany, can also take up some of the very, very clear points that you have made. That would be my plea, that this could be the start rather than the end of future conversation, demands. And as you have said, there is a federal election upon us. Let us make sure that the new government will be confronted with a clear demand to open a new chapter in this conversation rather than close it prematurely. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much.